Standing in front of some Toronto graffiti, next to some flowers that are right across in purple. Car just drove by and they're wondering who's singing, 'cause it's so good. I have Frantic Lullabies here, specifically Madi. Fantastic conversation. Not quite as good as the song I just sang, but pretty good. Very insightful. Great guy. Hope you enjoy. I'm Alex Southey, and this is Your Worst Song. I already hit the recording just before, so we should be all good. I really appreciate it. I seemed eager, and it's funny meeting some musicians where they hear about this and they're like, yes, I have a song right for that. I can't wait to talk shit about it.
Absolutely, dude.
That's how it hit you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not sure what my friend is going by, because I know him as Raiden. I think he goes by Shane these days.
Okay.
But he's been following us since our college days. And usually anything he tends to send our way, I'm I can trust him, so therefore any friend of Shane is a friend of ours. So kudos to Shane.
Amazing. Hell yeah. Yeah. Well, I would love to hear getting into that a little bit more. That references your background a little bit. I would love to hear more, and just be on behalf of the listeners as well, talk a little bit about your band and how the band began, how you came to Toronto. Are you from Toronto? All of these fun things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's been, I guess to answer first about Toronto, it's been a bit of an elusive thing for us.
Okay.
For the most part, it's been something where we've been working with Hamilton, Guelph, Kitchener more recently, different kinds of cities just around the GTA and the GTHA. Toronto was something we actually almost had, and I was a good boy for the last couple of years and just hadn't caught COVID for that solid 3 to 4 years. I'm not sure exactly when we. Right?
You deserve a badge or something. That's something else.
Some kind of Purple Heart, because I was working at a Shoppers at the same time.
Oh, wow. So you were one of the frontline workers, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. I even had a dude just visibly sweating coming up to me. And I was just I turned off all the hi, how are you? And I was just bro, are you good? And he just didn't answer me. And I'm I am spraying everything.
Oh, yeah. I want to walk around in a bubble at that point.
Basically. But, we had missed our chance for Toronto. At this one point, I had caught COVID. Our drummer Cody, he'd unfortunately had his second concussion as of 2023, and we were just there's something about this that just is probably telling us we should just take it easy.
Wow. So if that's the case, then where were you initially based? Forgive me.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, because we're we kind of purposely keep that vague.
Okay, then no worries. You don't need to say it if you don't want to.
It's all good. Yeah, because we're all from different areas. It's kind of a matter of where we've been, who we know, and that sort of thing. We try to really have that the community aspect to us, where our guitarist James is from Hamilton. I'm born and raised Guelph myself. The members have, of course, changed just throughout the years,
of course,
as things do. But now there's a couple of us out in Guelph. There's a couple of us out in Hamilton. So it's really cool that we get to diversify and just kind of high five everybody as we go along.
And I love that high fiving idea, and I love your two bases. Then for the band, you could argue, are Hamilton and Guelph, which are in their own right, in my opinion, good music cities with their own music scenes. I love that. Obviously, it's beneficial for reasons I don't even need to get into to be in Toronto, just because there's a lot going on. It's as simple as that. But I like the idea of leaving it as a continued destination or island that you can go back and forth to, but still spend some time in a slightly less densely populated but still music obsessed city.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, it's something I've definitely seen growth in since my youth, because it felt we almost kind of missed the boat, it seemed, because as you talk to like some of the older heads in Guelph, it's like they talk about all these places where they had a lot more open mics and they had a lot more venues and that sort of thing. So there was that weird, and maybe it was due to COVID that this all changed. But it was definitely for,
it's a good
like,
point.
for me that I did like the open mic thing back when I was like in my late teens, 18, 19, something like that. And this place that's now closed, but like the Sapphire, like really gave me my start, where I was like, okay, I got to think of a name and I got to like do something with these songs. And crazy, like, enough, not that this is my our worst song, but
Sure.
Pencil, like Pencil in of itself, is 10 years old now.
Whoa, and it's just gone through this process of being reformatted until it was right to come out, kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much. It was something I really felt like, as like the elements kept going and we kept improving personally, it was something where we finally had, I think, all the working parts, and we just needed to really just make that jump and say, like, okay, if we can make this sound as good as we think, then like, what are we doing? Just like mishmashing our parts. Let's bring more like people in. Let's make this a bigger joint if we really can, and we did.
I love that. I love that you kind of had the self-control to wait. I know that Oasis isn't necessarily a beacon or symbol of good music to a lot of people in this generation now. I personally like their hits or whatever, but
Sure.
this is related to one of their hits that I heard about even before the band was formed, or maybe around the time that Noel Gallagher, the songwriter, joined. He wrote All Around the World, which is a single they released like 7 years later, because he knew he wanted certain aspects for it that he could by no means afford at the beginning of the band. And he had to wait until he had, a label's bank account to add an orchestra and all of that stuff, but he knew that's what he wanted. And so that's what this reminds me of. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but you're
Sure.
sitting on it until you feel like it's the right time or right way to express it.
Very much so. When we were doing Apollo, that really was something that we were looking at all of our like material that we had at that point, because I think at this point in Frantic's life, I think it was about 2 years old. We had, I'm going to say, like anywhere between 6 to 8 songs, but of course a few of those are like unfinished. So like what you want to quantify as a song, probably closer to 4, 5, 6. And Pencil was one of them. But we were looking at just what kind of music we were making at the time, and we realized that if you put this right next to that, it's going to make people just basically have a question mark written on their foreheads of like, could have you have done something different with this and that? And then there would have been all this like overthinking, as we're more like already talking about that we were doing at like the time. So we were just like, if we know that with these sets of songs that we can go like right in and just like record and do it the first time, let's do that and not try to make this first project this like series of messy overthinking things, and just go.
I love that. You're just sort of, it doesn't mean you can't do certain little things after you're done, but get most of the first blast out just like as naturally as you can. That's what it sounds like you did. Without fussing over it too much. Like you fussed pre-recording, and now that you're there, you just do it, right? I think that
Precisely.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, that makes me think of the way maybe you play all of the band, which leads me to the first question I usually ask, which is, what's your worst gig experience? Which you can take any way.
Oh yeah. We tend to it's kind of funny for us because it's technically a series of gigs.
Oh, fantastic!
That we had done, where like this is of course just like early Frantic, probably 2017, 2018, like when we really started to, I think, have other people take us more seriously.
Are you wearing a Norm hat, as in Andy Schaaf or Andy Schaaf?
Do you know who that is? This is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't met them, but I know them. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, man. Oh yeah, no, I love Andy Schaaf so much.
That's so cool. I swear I've been paying attention to everything you're saying, but for those who want to listen, just so people know, I'm doing the video versions on Patreon, so you can see. Got a great and simple Norm Andy Schaaf hat here. And also, how would you describe your background? You've got a bunch of changing lights that you might see. They're like sort of atmospheric glowy lights.
Oh, I think what's the name? LED?
Oh yes, they're LED. They're sort of doing the LED equivalent of a less, like think about what a lava lamp projects onto a wall, but less 70s and more just general colors that bleed into it. You know what it looks like is an old Windows 95 like back screensaver background to me, in the best way. In the best way.
My favorite description of like this background is the fact that it can't, it can also do like just solid colors. Let's say like this.
Oh, whoa!
And
I'm interviewing you in hell.
Exactly. And so like somebody came into, like when I was streaming this like previous year, somebody came in, their first time chat was, I love this dude's aura, he's in hell.
Exactly.
And I was like, welcome to hell. I kind of shaved my horns down, like.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also perfect because Norm, right, part of that album is about heaven and hell and life and death and all that, right?
Exactly. The I think perspective, like God's perspective, I think is what Andy was working with.
Right. Yeah, you don't know him personally, do you? You're just a fan?
I've probably seen him, I want to say 2 or 3 times. I want to call us friends, but that's a blatant lie.
Yeah, we're besties. He doesn't know it, but we are. Yeah. He's Andy to me. Anyway, for those who, I'd be surprised if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know Andy Schaaf, but go check out their music. They're excellent. Sorry to cut you off. Great.
Oh, it's all good. No, yeah, thank you. I always love just like actually meeting anybody that knows who Andy Schaaf is, because it's so rare.
Is it rare? I feel like I just lived off the edge of Parkdale in Liberty Village, and you as a fan will know, he made that album, The Neon Skyline, which is about the Skyline restaurant diner in Parkdale. So I used to go there just as a regular diner, and it's so cool to be living in the concept album that he created. So cool. Yeah, it's very, I just love anything home. I know he's not from here initially, but I love that it's people who aren't self-conscious about writing about Canada or niche topics about Canada, and it's not cheesy. There's exactly he's able to land that plane very well.
I think, and like, I'm not sure if you have like a personal favorite album of his, but I really am like what's the word? I'm trying not to be like too dramatic and saying like I'm devastated, but how he kind of, I feel like it was a COVID album, so maybe that's what it is for him. But Wilds.
Oh yes.
I love that album so much, and he doesn't talk about it ever.
I didn't get too much into it either because I felt like it was very much in the shadow of Neon Skyline. And now the Norm album is a lot more well known, right?
That seems to be the case. It maybe could have just been the timing with it. I feel like it was 2020, 2021.
That is an entire void that is that's a line in every history book, now. It's just bizarre. Yeah. Anyway, this whole thing could be about him, but I want to hear about the series of bad gigs.
Oh yeah, it was for those not familiar with Hamilton who are listening, there were and still are plenty of like amazing like venues out of Hamilton. One of which that still exists to this day is Doors Pub on Hess Street. And
this place has been the subject of other worst gig stories of people who have come on here.
It's so great. It's like one of those places that like the reason why I think that you can have like your worst gig story there, it can obviously be situational.
Of course.
As it always is. And for us, what was situational about it was the fact that we had played there. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say we played there 8 consecutive times in 2 months.
That is a lot.
That's too much. And some of those
twice is arguably too much in that time frame, depending on how popular you are locally.
Yeah.
Anyway, wow. So 8 times.
8 times. I'm pretty sure it was 8, but that was I feel like like one of those like rookie band moves where I was basically saying like what they tell you in places like Mohawk College, or like just if you don't like go to school, I feel like you still hear that whole say yes, figure it out later type of thing.
Yeah.
But
which is maybe good advice, actually, generally.
It's pretty good advice, but I feel like if it's like it's a Tuesday and you start at 6 p.m. and it's done by 8, it's like,
That's a tough one.
Yeah, maybe talk it over first. Don't just say yes.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially for people listening, because like, then if you, let's say you say yes and then you back out, I don't blame the venue for them being a little bit frustrated, maybe, which is
Sure.
that it leads to a bit of tension when you book the next time. So it does pay to be a little bit choosy, I guess. I think that advice is good for people who are truly just starting out, like taking their first steps in the scene. Then try and get in as much as possible, because by virtue of just starting in the scene, you won't get as many as 8 gigs probably over 2 months, right?
Yeah.
That's an anomaly. I've never even heard of that with locally popular, really popular bands, you know?
Yeah, it's like kind of bizarre in some way that
But that's so cool. As at the same time, that would give you a lot of real estate to play with your own songs and the way you change sets and that kind of thing.
and that was I think our grandest mistake was we didn't change anything.
Oh, you didn't? Oh.
Everything was exactly the same. Like, sure, we did, of course, like maybe introduce one new song.
Yeah.
And at that point, like the room was already clear. Like it was probably like the 6th or 7th time where people are just like, I think even a friend of ours, who is actually now in the band Cute, but he had asked our like you know them too.
I don't know them personally. I know the band, and I've talked to them a little bit. They might end up coming on.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the guitarist from that band, he had asked our guitarist James. He was like, "Are you guys playing Doors Pub again?" And James said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Are you guys like a Doors Pub band now?" It's like that's all like we could do, and he kind of like didn't know what to say either, because he's also saying yes to these gigs, and we were just kind of figuring it out. So
totally,
it was something where we're glad to have had like that experience of like, this is what like an extremely condensed amount of time working on like the same songs, putting them out there can be like. And it's like what I was referring to with what was so like bizarre, but this time wasn't just the fact that we, of course, completely burned ourselves out with all this work.
Of course.
It was, like also that somehow most of the bands that we had worked with over all these years seem to have come from that exact time and are still here. Like bands like Ricochet, Lost Arts, Mauve Grove, people who were in Woolly Mantis who have now like come out to be like Dan Walton and the Dreamland Band, things like that. Like just kind of like seeing all these friends of ours like kind of grow and mold themselves into who like they are now, and how we've done like the same thing. It's just kind of like that neat thing of like being on this like parallel road with each other, and just every so often kind of like
looking over in the lane and still seeing. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I know exactly how you feel, and it sounds like with reference to what we were just talking about with worst gigs, it sort of makes you think back on that time and then think about all the time that's passed since, and how you've grown, the perception of you. Like initially you were a Doors Pub band potentially to some people, and that set you off on a new path. Now you're on a new path, and blah blah blah, and now all those bands are here. Like you're saying, I feel totally the same way about with my sort of closer group of musician friends. It's especially the ones that I knew pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. It's all like we're looking at each other, dusting each other off, like, fuck, okay, we're still all here, still gonna do it. Okay, all right. Part of it is, I think part of being, this is obviously this word is relative, but successful even locally in a community, part of it is just fucking sticking around. You just have to stick around. Like, if like people won't continue to support you if your music isn't good, but if your music is good and you have like the work ethic and all that stuff, just stick around, and people will begin to notice who is remaining and who was like a flash in the pan for 6 months.
Yeah, I've actually been having this conversation like recently with quite a few bands I think we played over like the last couple of years, because of course coming out of like a pandemic, we've also not only just gotten to play with the bands that we knew previously, but newer ones coming up post-pandemic. And like you get a lot of the same, you know, like attitudes, points, ideas, like philosophies. Like it's kind of weird like for us now, because it's almost like, when did we get old? And
yes,
like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And we're kind of going through talking like to some of these guys, and you'll kind of hear that whole thing with like what they consider success, what they consider richness, like that sort of thing. Or like you'll hear people talk about wanting like to succeed, and I usually always try to hit them with those kinds of questions with, yeah, like you could fail, but what if you succeed? And then like what does that mean? And like does that look very like granular and very like I don't know, like Olympus, or is that maybe to some people is that just playing in bars?
Yeah, consistently. Yeah,
like consistently, and being that person being hired.
I agree. The sense of your sense of success totally changes based on where you are in your own career or how you're seeing other people or whatever. I would say, I think as teenagers, anybody growing up, imagining being on a talk show in the shower or playing some huge festival or whatever. Weirdly, at least speaking for myself, as you begin to take tiny steps up in a local scene or whatever, the more you get into it, the more your dreams they don't grow, they actually contract to reality. That's how I found it. And I don't think it's just growing up, although part of it is that. I think it's just like you have a better understanding of how things work, how much you want to actually participate in this industry once you know how it works. And that changes your sense of success. And like what you're saying, what if you do get success? What if you do get success even on the level of like you're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars? People struggle at that point with what to do. So it's definitely worth thinking about, no matter where you are in your career, what success looks like, for sure. And also, don't feel bad if your goalposts shift over time. I want to say that for sure.
More money, more problems.
I think that's true for a lot of people. There are some people who can handle it, but they're robots.
Sure. It's well, I guess for me, it's like, there's more money, more problems. And for me, it's more pedals, no problems.
More pedals, no money.
Exactly.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
If you have no money, you shed more,
I love pedals too. I could talk about pedals for a while.
I had a problem.
Well, maybe that could actually relate to one of your best gigs. Like, does that ever factor in the way you play and the way your pedals are functioning? Theoretically, your pedals, if you've got them all set up per song, they shouldn't change, or they should sound the same every time. But the reality is it's a human working with a system, so organically there will be tiny changes. I'm curious if the success of the use of your pedal board factors into really good shows.
It's my favorite thing to talk about with people sometimes. like when they come up and like want to talk about how simplified I like made it seem, or like how comparable that like myself and James are, that mine's very much like the analog digital, like it's just a pedal and then a pedal and then a pedal. There's like like the effects loop and all that kind of stuff. And he's just a straight like Axe effects into an XLR right into the DI. Like he's the like easiest to set up. Yeah. And like for that reason, do I have like a more limited amount of tonal capability? Yes. But then I like hear like quantifying like how many possible patches he has, and he's like, oh, about like 20,000. Yeah,
that's insane.
And I'm like, how many of those do you use? And he's like, 5.
Yeah.
And I'm over here just with, like my phone, just with like the most settled into my one particular, or like all of my pedals, like where I'm just like, oh, this is what particular settings I have, because obviously you throw it into a gig bag, it all gets messed up.
Yes.
So then it's situational, where I get into like a room and maybe it's too small or it's larger, and I'm just getting hit with the sound different, and I'm like, okay, suddenly I want my EQ to have like more high end instead of this like typical low, because I play a Strat, so it's like, oh, that needs to come down always.
Oh yeah, always. Yeah, everything is too bright on a Strat, almost like not regularly, but in context of a lot of bands, or live, especially coming through, it just gets this trebly thing if you're not careful.
Very much so.
Well, relating to bigger gigs, do any stand out if you played like a massive festival, or if you played a massive show at a venue you wanted to always play at, or play with a band that you always want to play with?
I feel like that like because we were talking about goalposts earlier, like that seems to keep changing for us, almost keeps evolving in terms of where think about constantly is like what Frantic felt like, at least for me, in college, where it was basically all of us trying to make like this thing work, but it was obviously like nobody wants to do like all that serious heavy lifting because it's like Madi's project, like I don't want to step on any toes. I'm extremely like collaborative in the fact that I don't think I'm always right, and that's
that is a good quality in collaboration.
Kind of shocking for some people where they're just like, wait, you don't have like all the answers? I'm like, you thought I had answers?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I have more questions than you.
Yeah, everything's a question mark, void.
Yeah, basically. Totally. So when it came to like what we always consider to be like a dream of ours is kind of like situational to like the like members in the band sometimes, or it's something where like we're met with who we get to work with like even separately from the band, and then we get to like bring them in because we realize like, oh wow, there's all this like cool collaborative like energy just between us. Like what's it like in like the room? And that's how we got some more locals in from Hamilton to like be on the album, like Hannah McFarlane. She was actually in our like college program. I think she might have been a year before us, but she's like constantly on the road with Damn It Goldie, and like some of those guys I've also like gone to school with, met personally since then. And so it's like this crazy thing where it's like you just don't know until you try with like certain bands or certain elements where you're just like, oh, you're going like veering off like this way, and well, that's cool, we're going like this way, but do you want to meet in like the middle and like we can like try to make something work,
come up with a cool complementary bill is what you're saying basically.
Yeah, like essentially like even Hannah I think is on specifically Blurry Vision, Ashes, she's on both of those. Emma Whale, who like we've actually recently oh yeah, like you've probably been to Catherine North.
No, but I just know the name.
Gotcha. That they were on like What We Follow, and it was like kind of this happenstance of Hannah only had so much time that she could have in like the studio, and of course life happens, and then like Emma stepped in, and of course there's that sort of like weird thing that happens where you only just met and you're like, wait, does this like enhance it? Like, do we know each other like that well? Because that's always something for us where like we're not really too concerned with how somebody sounds. Like anybody can sound great, anybody can sound bad, like things happen. It's like do I know you?
Yeah, do I feel comfortable with you? Do I not feel self-conscious around you throwing?
It's the return of the song from the start. You're silent back, but this time far longer. Because it's about a minute I have to fill. Because it's a lot longer. There are no ads I can make today. People are eyeing me up today. But they are wearing weird sandals today. So they just laugh with their friends. So they just laugh with their friends. So they just laugh with their friends. Actually, I'm walking by it right now. I will do a quick ad. It's a real ad. It's for College Falafel. It's at College and Ossington. And they claim to make the most unique falafel in Toronto. They specified not best, most unique.
Great, anybody can sound bad, like things happen. It's like do I know you?
Yeah, do I feel comfortable with you? Do I not feel self-conscious around you throwing out musical ideas or performing? I think,
sure.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Well, it's true that goalposts change, but to continue to use the metaphor, goalposts at a certain point are stuck in the ground, and you want to kick through the goalpost. So what Definitely. Are current goalposts?
A current goalpost, it like sort of the like what's next for Frantic sort of thing?
What's an achievement in your head, I guess, that something you're looking forward to do or something you want to achieve? This isn't normally something I ask. It just occurred to me based on talking about it.
Exactly, yeah, because like my ambition is something I feel like the band has to reel in sometimes.
I totally agree with you. I said this to my mom a long time ago, actually, but I was like, riding your own ambition and enthusiasm for your music is like, you need to be nearly delusional and then sometimes also bring yourself back to reality. So it's like you need to think that in 100 years, maybe your stuff will be good enough. It'll be on a fucking loony. And you need to, and other times people need to tie cement to your shoes so that you come back to earth, you know?
Most definitely. I think for now, I could at least say I'm really hoping that in the next year, Frantic is playing a lot more festivals. We've played plenty of underground shows. We've played at plenty of bars. We've played plenty of like venues like in between, like that sort of thing. And I guess it's obvious that like anybody who is in like their own band says something like, "Oh, I want this to go all like the way," and just like you want more, and
of
you
course,
want to see like this thing that you've nurtured over years to really go as far as you think it can possibly go. So I guess that would be what I would want to say, but of course I'm also at the same time trying to be that person that is just down on the ground being like, okay, I need our work to reflect that then, so I'm just like boots on the ground for that reason.
Great point. I think your ambition and your dreams can lead you, but the work needs to follow. Otherwise it's just daydreaming at that point.
I feel like that was something I should have said too with like bands even that were talking to us about like that particular thing, like, oh, like what if we fail? I always let them know too. It's like, dude, you sounded great. And they'll tend to always be that band that tells you, oh, I made all like some mistakes. If you said nothing,
yes,
I would have not even noticed. Totally.
That is the case for almost everybody, unless they're like your biggest fan, listens over and over to everything or whatever. Most 99% of people are not going to notice if you screwed up unless it's stop the song level, you know?
And for those actually watching like with the video, it's something to like see like a bandmate do like that at you. And
yes.
Like you almost have to make a face back at them like, stop.
Exactly. Like I heard this from I had a like music teacher or whatever in grade 7 at our school, and I remember them saying one piece of advice. It doesn't work all the time, but it's kind of a good idea. It is, if you screw up during a performance, especially something like during a solo, the next time you get to that part, screw up again the same way, and it then looks on purpose, even if it sounds somewhat disjointed. I think it's a bit of a band-aid to cover up a mistake. It's not the perfect thing, but if you're in a pinch, it's not the worst idea.
Yeah,
to do that.
It's something like, as much as you can take yourself seriously, I think you just need to learn to laugh off your mistakes.
Totally. It's going to be it's one thing for you to feel uncomfortable. It is much worse for your discomfort to make the audience feel uncomfortable. So just try and hold that in. Well, I'm curious getting into that then. And if that ever factors in, especially talking about your pedal board, I'm curious what your best or favorite song is from the band that has been released.
Best or favorite? I guess it's... I have to agree with James on this one, because he was saying how sonically Blurry Vision, in his opinion, is our best song, just due to how everything is working tangibly with each other. Mm-hmm. Despite maybe the fact that it probably has like the least instrumentation that we have on it compared to, I think, every song that we put out since then. But it's just 2 guitars, bass, drums, a little bit of keys, and voice. And even that, I feel like maybe even just a slight bit more like instrumentation maybe than what we had on Apollo, just due to the fact that we added one harmony.
Right. Ooh, really spreading your wings there. Yeah.
Exactly, right. Really treading water. And so maybe it's Blurry Vision. I think for me at the same time, it could be What We Follow. Mm-hmm. For me personally, and I feel like why that is that I very much enjoy the risk factor of having a wild card song.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me.
In an otherwise collection of songs you like, but maybe what people would expect.
Totally. It's something where, like, even depending on who can make it that night, you could hear a completely different version of What We Follow because Mike, our sax player, just can't make it. So then it's a solo that James takes, and there's still to this day, I tell him maybe too much, that this one particular video that we have of him taking a solo, like over what we follow. I think it's like the one with me in like an orange hat and a striped blue shirt.
Go search for it, people.
Seriously. And he's got like right off the top, I'm playing like an F minor chord for people that know what this stuff is. He's just playing this minor second right off the top that just, he somehow does that and like ascends it through major and minor thirds. And I'm just like, oh my God, the whole time he's doing it.
Amazing. That sounds dope. So it's like a new thing that just sprung out of necessity because the saxophone wasn't there.
Yeah, it's something where we're always pretty much prepared to play our own parts, yes. But of course, like if one person can't make it, this person can't like do this. It's almost like, like especially for me, I'm the kind of person that if the whole band can't make it and it's just me, what songs can I do that function just even a guitar voice? Because even I feel like, and maybe this is like an overused point, but how like Paul McCartney said,
you got it.
Yeah, that like if you can boil down a song to a shaker, a bass, and a voice, it's a good song. And I almost then try to do that with every song that we've ever done over COVID. Well, not like over COVID, but like all the songs that we had done up to that point, just to say like, okay, if like the band does like dissolve due to this, because like that was happening to many bands over the course of COVID, and like that was in the back of my mind when we had like a few lineup changes over like the years. That then is when it like officially started happening, and I was like, oh god, and just thought like all this was falling apart in my mind. And then I started really taking control of my own environment with just making all this work with just me. And I wasn't really realizing it at the time, which is something I feel like I kind of like need to give myself like my roses for, that like I was teaching myself still like musical things, like despite the fact that like I'm not in school, I'm not gigging, there's no point really in doing any of that. And you hear like a lot of that over like a lot of different bands that like, yeah, I just did nothing like over COVID.
I hear that like, a lot too, and I'm like, how? Or don't you have the compulsion? Like,
oh god, I had such a compulsion.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, hey, look, they probably benefited in some way from the relaxation or not working on music in some way, but I just couldn't. When I say compulsion, I don't even mean it totally positively. I mean it in a gray space, you know.
I've just always had that thing about me where pretty much every like environment I'd been in from pretty much high school, like even now it kind of feels like, so I'm not sure like when I passed over like that line of like uncomfortable to comfortable, but I feel like as though I always keep myself mentally uncomfortable in the sense that I would like to assume that somebody else in the room has some kind of knowledge of music theory, guitars, pedal, like just not to
you're open to learning.
The smartest guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Something where I just knew, like even back in college, and I tell like a lot of my students this too, because I'll teach as well, that James in the band, when you get into Mohawk, like one of the first things that they do is that they test your sight reading ability. And being, of course, a stereotypical guitarist, I can read tab.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, and so I of course see James at the top of this list that they put up in the hallway, him way at the top at 5, and because there was so many, I think there was like 30-40 like guitar players, I'm way down here with 2.
Yikes. Yeah.
And a lot of people saw like those stars and just left like the program as a result, and I was just there like, okay, I can shake off like that anxiety of what if I am the best, and that then means like I have all these expectations of both like myself and from my peers, and nobody had any expectations, not even myself.
Great point.
I finally just made like that decision, like to say like, okay, I can just keep telling myself I suck, and that's probably true, or I can just take like that L and just say like, okay, I can only go up from here.
Well, I think you're looking at it in a good way, but I also want to say it seems like maybe you're looking at it in only one way, which is, were you good at sight reading or not, and that explicit and that equaling you're good at guitar or not. And I think the thing to remember is that doesn't mean that you're bad at guitar or that you're forgive me, what was his name? The person you were just referencing?
Oh, James.
James, sorry. It doesn't necessarily mean he's better at guitar. It just means he's better at sight reading guitar, right? It's just like, I get that it's easy to feel bad. So I probably would have felt bad if I was in that position, and maybe whatever, but it's smart to think like, that's not everything.
Exactly.
That's even a larger point, is how well you do in academics isn't everything.
It's one of my favorite points to like bring up for this reason, that it kind of feels like a lot of different angles that you can approach this particular point from, in that you can make it about sight reading, you can make it about playing ability, or even just like, should you go to music school?
Right.
And
right.
like the answer changes depending on, of course, who like you are, because of course, like I was saying before, that many different like guitarists just left because they had realized like, oh, I'm not that guy.
Yes, right, exactly.
And for me, I always went in just like, no, I'm not that guy. Like I was very much during my college years, and I'm sure that there's still quite a few peers from that time that could tell you that I was always doing this, just raising my hand, because I don't know what anyone's talking about.
Oh, but that takes so much humility that not a lot of college students have. So that's great. You were the, like, yin to the yang of all of those like douchebags in poli sci being like, I actually can solve everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like 4/4 is great, but all that I can really feel anymore is in like sextuplet polyrhythms, and anything else just makes me angry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's the classic march to the beat of your own drum, do what feels right to you.
Definitely. Like I'll say now, like I went to a jazz school. I'm still not convinced.
That's funny. Okay, well, maybe leading from that from that negative into this negative, what would you say, official time, drum roll, is your worst song? What have you chosen?
I think worst song, I really had to think about this, because I'll actually answer your question, because I feel like I keep like going into a story instead of just like answering.
No, it's
like,
a
directly.
podcast. But yeah,
of course. That I feel like the worst song might be Rusty. The reason I think being is first where it came from, but then what it turned into. And there's also kind of a positive, because I feel like I still take something out of it, is that like to this day, is it still like a song that we perform? Yes. It came about because like once again, I was kind of like that underdog in college, that like it was like that make or break of, I could, take all this like negative information and just take it solely as a negative and just quit and just not like do anything about that. But then people were seeing like the reverse, that I was trying. And there was then, of course, like that more snobbish music crowd that then says like, oh, but you can't play in like 5.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to go learn 5 now. so like with Rusty, it's like one of our favorite songs to perform for that reason of that I kind of came up with it out of spite.
I love that. This sounds like best song, not worst song.
It's like I put it in 5 for about 3 bars, 6 for 1 bar, 11 for maybe about 18.
I love this. This is fantastic.
And like you could obviously tell by the like by that 11 part that we were all kind of like working with this one particular rhythm that I had written out, that it was like well, like you'll hear it kind of like folds in on itself, like you can't tell where one is most of the time. And I was trying out my more like distorted voice, which at this point was not there like at all.
Okay.
And it's just me yelling from like right in my like throat.
Yeah.
And
instead of diaphragm, as they say, instead of chest and all that.
Instead of like anything with any sort of actual like practice, it's just loud and angry.
Yes. Hey, well, that's sometimes fitting.
I feel like, in my opinion, it's maybe my worst in terms of vocal performance, in my opinion. Just that it's like one of those things where it sounds like it hurts to do, and you're absolutely right, because of especially that time where I didn't know what I was doing, versus now when like people hear me do like that song, but then I can do 6 more after that. It's like, I like thankfully learned how to not do that way.
It sounds like to me you're choosing it as worst because of not because you think the song is bad, but because you think the way you expressed it during the recording and where you were at is needed improvement. Because now it's like you can play it live and you, correct me if I'm wrong, you feel okay with it.
Totally.
So that's such an interesting thing, because something that I've asked other people in the past is, would you revive this worst song for whatever reason? And I would say most of them have said no. Some people will say we still play it, but we've changed it around. Its personality has changed or whatever. Would you say that when you play it now, its personality has changed? Like you could call it not a different genre, but like not very recognizable? Or would you say it just sounds like you worked out the kinks of what was already an established personality you stuck with?
I feel as though that's the right way of putting it. Yeah, that
Okay.
it kind of felt like it was something that we were doing maybe just in an inexperienced way, where like we hadn't realized like what kind of sound we were really going for. Even I think on the recording that we had like done a few different like pedals like through like especially my part, and we just weren't sure, like, do we want this more like sludgier fuzz sound, do we want this more like overdriven sound? And there was a lot of conversation around that particular part, and it's something now that I guess I go back on it and just say like, oh screw, I should have just done it like through a fuzz this entire time.
Right, that would have just taken out the effort you had to put in, and it's like the Strokes vocal sound a little bit, right? He's probably just singing into a fuzz box.
I think so, yeah.
A lot, anyway. Yeah, but
All the time. It's like a point that because I almost, to tell you the truth, like almost scrapped Apollo for the most part for our sets, and like a lot of conversation James and I had, because he's like been there since like day one, like our first of many Doors Pub gigs, and he was talking about how like these songs still matter even if you don't think so, and I then had
That's
to...
an album name. That's fantastic. That could be an album name.
Like he was like making that point, and then I like remembered something. I still can't remember who this exactly was, but it was somebody that recorded a song. I believe it was the 1960s, and it was a very popular. I want to say it was either funk or it was Motown. Like don't quote me on this, but particularly like the song like was made, and then somebody was trying to interview like this person about 20 years later from when it was initially like recorded, and the thing that like he had to say was, there's not anything left I can say personally as the person who has recorded like that song. I could tell you how I did it, who was there, why we did it. The song belongs to the universe now.
No,
So
I love that.
Like whatever anybody else has to say about it is great, and it's like, I'm glad that people still enjoy it, but it's really not mine anymore.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. It reminds me of a very similar thing that Neil Young said, which is, it's not exactly the same thing as what you're saying, but it's related to this idea of people wanting you to explain your song. And apparently what he said to the interview, like this wasn't the song, but let's just say it was Heart of Gold or something. And the interviewer said, I'd love for you to tell us what Heart of Gold is about. And his answer was, the lyrics in the song are what it's about. That's what the song's doing. That's what the song is there for, is to be what it is. Anything I tell you is second to what the song tells you itself, which is such a Neil Young answer, because it's a little bit of a non-answer and evasive, but also poetic and true and insightful. Yeah,
it's very much like you got to stop caring so much.
You got to it's so... Yeah, you know what's so funny is I used to be the type of person who really wanted to know what my favorite artists thought about their songs and what they meant. And then as soon as I kicked my own career into gear and I wanted to really... And I'd once in a while do an interview where somebody asked me about a song, I instantly related to those bands who didn't really want to say, because it immediately limits the scope of that song too. But it's basically, all I'm trying to say is it's funny that I didn't change my mind until I was in the actual other seat. Yeah. It's
like bizarre. Like like sometimes trying to describe like your own process to someone else, 'cause it definitely can sound, maybe to someone else it sounds contrived, or it sounds like not like what they thought at all, or just like
Yes.
they're making up like an answer. The thing that I often do if I'm trying to write like a song is that I feel as though where like I try to come from is like of a place of how things like even feel, because I'm writing like most of this just on my own, that I'll have an idea, like bring it to the guys, but before like that even happened, there had to be this like agreement between like me and my instrument of just like, do we agree ourselves on what's going on here? And then, okay, what are we talking about? And it's often this thing that you'll hear with Blurry Vision, What We Follow, Ashes. It seems very much either a descriptor of oneself or a conversation with oneself that seems to be split into two different people, because that's often something that I feel like happens like emotionally with a lot of people, is that you tend to be in this particular state, like whatever state that might be, like be it anger or like a depressive episode, something like this, where you feel like a personality or a person split in half, where it's this version of you that you can see, but then the version of that is like sort of like behind that piece of glass that's seeing you do that. Like, what is wrong with you? Like
yes,
something like that.
I totally know what you mean, and sometimes that's how. That's not just other people's perception of you. That can almost be your own self looking at yourself. Like maybe that's what you were saying. Just sort of two versions of the same person, and one is almost surprised the other half exists and is doing the thing they're doing. Is that kind of what you mean?
Oh, very much so. That it could be like read in like those multiple ways, like I was saying, that it's something that you can make it sound like it is two opposite people.
Oh, you're right, but is like actually
having a conversation.
Yes, but is actually one person having a conversation about or with themselves.
Or is it?
Or is it? Dun, dun, dun. Well, on that note, I would love for you. Sorry, my eye's itchy. I would love for you to just reiterate your name, band name, song name of your worst song, air quotes, and thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation.
That was definitely, man.
I learned a ton.
Thank you. Yeah, just for having me. Well, I've been Madison Daniels. My band name is Frantic Lullabies. Don't listen to Rusty, and that could be just like reverse psychology. But I guess you should also then not listen to any other of our songs. Maybe
exactly. Don't listen to this band's terrible. This guy's a terrible person. He paid me $50 to do this. No.
My plans.
50. Yeah. And I am looking down at them, and the 50s have Madison's face on them. No.
Monopoly money.
That was fantastic, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Have no purpose these days. The talk keeps my voice hoarse. Wise am I in my years? Yet there is